I've put in provisions in my LLCs that if I pass, then my wife, it kind of transfers to my wife, and she has all authorities to act on behalf of the LLCs and all that stuff. Because, I mean, I don't want my employees not to be able to get paycheck.
If you're really trying to get a deal closed, is you can take it to superior court and get a declaratory judgment done, which says clearly this is going to go to the spouse or something like that. So if that's the only thing going through probate, or if there's a real time crunch, sometimes you can go to superior court, which is faster than probate court.
Right.
But often those LLCs are going to get wrapped up in probate just because they don't have any succession language in the operating agreement.
And if you have employees of that LLC, I've seen and heard of people who no one can run payroll, right? Because the person died. Who runs payroll, right?
That's one of the biggest things to think about too, is like if you have even a checking account over at like Bank of America, Chase, Ameris, wherever, if it's personal, you can say, if something happens to me, I'll sign a form that says it goes to Brad, he can continue operations, or it goes to my wife, she gets the money. But an LLC never dies. And since an LLC never dies, you can't put transfer on death or payable on death onto those accounts. And so if they're not already a signer before you get sick or die, it's going through court. And, you know, your employees love you. They want to support you, but you miss a paycheck round or two, you don't have any employees left. That's just the way it's going to work. And
that's right.
I think that's definitely a big deal. The other problem is you see people get in trouble, even if they are a signer, because they're trying to move money that maybe they didn't really have authority to. Remember that you can be personally liable to the creditors of that company or to the estate if you spend money on stuff you aren't supposed to. So like we had a family that had a service industry business, and really the phone number is probably the most valuable thing on there, but they had a bunch of like equipment as well and some inventory stock for service type stuff. And just to clear it out, because they needed to terminate the lease, the person in charge essentially sold it to a family friend for pennies on the dollar. And the problem with that was then whenever they went through probate, the creditors are like, well, where's the accounting of that? And she's like, oh, I just gave that away for like a couple grand. And they're like, oh, okay. And she didn't realize she did anything wrong. There was no malice behind it. She wasn't trying to, like, you know, get it one over on anybody. But then she had personal liability. And that cost a lot of money in legal fees to fix, where if they would have just had like that $500 operating agreement to start with,
yep,
it would have just been free. Or especially with LLCs and kids, one of the problems we see is, you know, one of the kids works in the LLC, maybe mom or dad told them, hey, if I die, this is yours. But if it's not written out that way, it's not going to go that way. You know, it can very easily get split between kids that don't work in the business. That causes a lot of fighting. So again, just make sure whenever we're talking about pre-planning, especially with assets like real estate businesses, you need to have it written down where this stuff goes.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Language. You know, I've put in provisions in my LLCs that if I pass, then my wife, it kind of transfers to my wife, and she has all authorities to act on behalf of the LLCs and all that stuff. Because, I mean, I don't want my employees not to be able to get paychecks and her not to be able to sell the assets of the, you know, of the LLCs because she doesn't want to, if I pass, my wife doesn't want to continue to manage a business, right? She's going to shut it down. She's going to probably transfer the assets or whatever. So
even in some businesses, she can't, right? So if you had like a real estate business, or like even in my law firm, non-lawyers can't own law firms. So like I can't transfer it to my wife. Now she can come in and manage it in a short period of time. She can still get paid out the value whenever it's, you know, transitioned away. But that all needs to be planned for. Unfortunately, things like chiropractor offices and CPA offices do this like the worst out of anybody, because both of those are restricted ownership businesses. They're usually pretty small, kind of like, you know, a head primary and a couple staff to help. It's not fair to your staff. It's not fair to your family. Just go ahead and get that stuff locked up.
Right. Yeah, definitely take care of that. Awesome.